Good morning. You can watch the show on Facebook. Search the Out of Bounds Show right now. Watch the show on Facebook. Search the Out of Bounds Show, and you can watch it on YouTube. Search Out of Bounds Sports. Check it out. We mixed up the helmets this week. We did add A&M and Kentucky because that's who Ole Miss and Mississippi State are playing. Isn't that innovative? So also Southern Miss and Delta State are also on the set right now. So you can watch the show on Facebook. Search the Out of Bounds Show. Don't forget that we are giving away a night at the Golden Moon Casino Hotel and 2 rounds of Dancing Rabbit Golf today. Give us a prediction on MSU A&M, Ole Miss, Kentucky, and why. A brief why as to why you pick whatever it is you do, 24, 21, so on, and why that will happen. And that's how you enter, and you could win a night at the Golden Moon Casino Hotel. And we don't recommend spending the night at the casino, by the blackjack table. But they have hotel rooms, and then you can play Dancing Rabbit Golf. And before you go there, you can upgrade your golf bag at Edwin Watts Golf Shop on County Line Road. But that's how you enter to win via the Ag Up Equipment text line, 601-885-3776. And again, you can watch the show right now on Facebook. Search the Out of Bounds Show. We welcome in Steve Robertson, 247 Sports, Gene's page. The Boneyard Podcast. Steve joins us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. All right, Steve, this A&M offense is really struggling to score. They're not that good. How would you describe the Mississippi State defense, personnel-wise, compared to the last 8 to 10 years or so?
I think it's a good defense. Is it great? No, I wouldn't want to say that yet, but I think it is good, and I think this is going to be a very defensive game. A&M really good in the red zone, but they don't give up much when things get kind of constrained down there close. I think you're going to have to score from distance a little bit, and sometimes that's been a challenge for Mississippi State. But I think, Anaya Smith being done for the year is very significant for A&M. He was their leading receiver, and they've only scored a handful of touchdowns via the pass. And so a lot of that's because of poor quarterback play with Haynes King. But this Bulldog defense is basically going to have to hold serve, with A&M. I don't think this is an explosive offense for the Aggies in any way whatsoever. Of course, Devin Achane is one of the best players in the country. But if you can find a way to contain him a little bit, make somebody else beat you, I think you're probably going to be in pretty good shape come Saturday night.
So I have it low scoring too. I mean, you think it's somewhere in the 24-21 range, or what do you see?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think if you're A&M, you'd probably like it to be in the teens, just because of the fact that,
Sure.
Even last week they needed a defensive touchdown to reach the 20s and win the game, and at no point in that game did it look like there was any rhythm on offense for Texas A&M. And now you've lost arguably, your best playmaker, Anaya Smith, and you hate that for the guy. I love that kid's game. But now he's no longer part of the program due to an unfortunate injury, and we all knew it when we saw it. I mean, and that's the fear you have over the grind of an SEC schedule is having guys get banged up. But, I expect a low-scoring game. I think it'll be an ugly game, too, because I think defensively both teams will make some plays.
Steve Robertson on the Yuengling Lager guest line. As far as – so you feel like Mississippi State's defense is good. I think it's solid at best right now, especially up front. I don't see a lot of athleticism and speed. You see something different?
I think this group, it maybe has not played its full potential yet. And it'll be interesting, too, against this A&M offensive line, but it's had some issues itself. I mean, if you saw the game last week, I mean, they rolled a couple of snaps back and had 3 or 4 more. Max Johnson's ankles, and, of course, that disrupts the timing of the play. This could be a chance for this defense to maybe have a really solid game, but I think some of that you have to factor in. There is some ineptitude on the Aggie offense, and I do think this Bulldog defense has has the potential to be pretty good. And I think it starts with that group up front. But you're going to need to exert yourself a little bit too. And I think this is a week where you can do that. I think you've got to go out there and stop the run because they're going to use Achane all over. They're going to move him around and get him in mismatches that are advantageous to the offense. So State's going to have to play really disciplined. As linebackers are going to be stressed by a guy like him. And that's the thing with him. I mean, I don't think State has anybody in the front or in that linebacker group that can run with that kid. And so if he gets loose and breaks this or contained, it's going to be a chunk play.
Do you expect Jaden Crumedy to play for MSU?
I think the only guy that didn't play last week that'll play this week is Woody Marks. And I was told he could have played last week, but you didn't need him to play Bowling Green and win that ball game. It's probably best to kind of get him some rest. You know, we all know he's had a couple of, big hits on the lower end of things. He's come back in and played through them, but those high ankle sprains are things that don't just heal overnight. And so, I do expect him back. John Lewis dressed last week. There's possibilities you see him play this week, but I think Jaden Crumberty's still probably a couple weeks out.
Okay, what are they? Where do you think? When you look at the Watson and Jet Johnson deal, that's not the most athletic group. And you kind of take Tyrus Wheat out, and I know Arnett does a little bit more with him. What have you seen from Deshaun Page, number 16, as far as when he's spelled at linebacker? What do you see from him?
Yeah, he's played pretty well, and he's a guy, too, that I think will be probably deeper in the rotation now, too. He missed some time early in camp due to a family issue, and Matt Brock told us, he was the most improved player in that unit from the spring. I think you're starting to see that a little bit, and I do think that he is a guy, too, that's maybe a tick ahead of some of those guys from an athleticism standpoint. I think it was just simply about kind of getting him reps and getting him ready.
Okay. The back end, there's more athleticism. Obviously, with Richardson and Forbes, Matthews for Mississippi State. You feel like that defensive front can contain Achane? Cam Young in the group without Crumedy? What do you see?
Well, they're not going to use him a lot in the middle of the field. They're going to try to get him out on the edges, and they'll swing it out to him. They'll get him out there paired up with a linebacker in a pass pattern. And so I think the stress of stopping Achane, number one, you got to move the line of scrimmage. That defensive front's got to, get up there and get a step forward. But I think by and large, a lot of that's going to boil down to how you handle it with the safeties. And can those guys go up there and set an edge and kind of prevent him from getting outside and getting into the secondary? And he is a very dangerous player. And that's the thing, too. In this conference, everybody's got a couple of those guys. I think that's the issue with A&M is they don't have enough of those guys. You don't have enough offensive skill to really stress people. And, we look at the scoring this year. I mean, they had a Devin Achane 95-yard touchdown kickoff return against Sam Houston State, and that was a 33-0 ball game. And you scored 33 points against an FCS team. And every other game since then, the offense has only been able to muster points in the teens. And now you've lost again your most explosive playmaker in the pass game. And so I think you look at this, and I think if you're State, you just got to go out there. You got to get off the field on third down. And A&M has not been elite when it's come to converting third downs. And this Bulldog defense has been pretty good against third down, but can be better.
Steve Robertson, genespage.com, 247 Sports. He joins us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Let's flip over to the other side, this matchup between DJ Durkin and Mike Leach. Durkin went against this offense the last 2 years. And last year, he really got the better of the offensive staff. Now, different deal, different time, so on. Will's a year older. You got some other things rolling for MSU. But you mentioned they're stingy in the red zone, and it's all about red zone scoring efficiency, whether it's offensive or defensive this day and age in football, college or NFL. So, having said all that, but they just prepped all last week for a team that ran 55 times and only threw it 19. So this is a total flip of the script for Durkin. How does that work in Mississippi State's favor going into this game?
Well, I do think you're right about that. There's not any carryover, and Jimbo Fisher said that Monday. It's two different variations of the spread. You got one that spreads you out and runs power running game, one that spreads you out and throws all over the field. And Will Rogers, that's the thing. You look back at that Ole Miss game last year. And of course, the personnel, obviously, it's different. Will Rogers had a good game against Ole Miss. And then you had, a half dozen drops, 3 of them on one drive. You had 4 touchdown passes dropped, and so I don't think that State goes into this thing feeling like they're overmatched in any way whatsoever. I think they feel like they can make plays against this defense. I think honestly, when you look up and down, this is not a shot at Ole Miss. I think, the 2 deep on this A&M defense is probably a little beefier, I guess, than what he had at Ole Miss. And so you've got a guy that runs a pretty good scheme with a little bit better personnel, so they're going to be a little bit stingier. But they are very impressive in the red zone. And I think, State has been a good red zone team offensively. So that really may boil down to how this game is decided is who wins in the red zone when State has the football.
Yeah. Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, driven by the Ram trucks at Mac Hike and Flowwood. What else are you looking at? You've had what was it, a 51 or 52-yard field goal that would have been good for another 10 yards last week for Mississippi State against Bowling Green. I think that got some of the fan base excited. The fact that the left foot, was it Rabin or Rayburn?
It's Rabin.
Yeah, Rabin. I mean, that was a hell of a kick. So he's the guy now? He's the dude?
Yeah, I think so. Massimo Biscardi helps them on kickoffs. And it's interesting you bring up special teams. I did some analysis on this last night for my own show. They put the ball out of the end zone on kickoff returns. And so when A&M kicks off, they've allowed, I believe, 1 return this year. All right, so that neutralizes the Tulu Griffin, Xavier Thomas thing a little bit. You look at their punt coverage, too. It's elite. I mean, they're getting they have one of the better punters in the country. They cover those kicks. They get good hang time. So special teams play, it's been kind of a weapon for Mississippi State the last few weeks, in many respects kind of neutralized. And so that means this offense is going to have to drive, 75 yards, at times offensively. And when you've got a defense like that, I mean, that's a recipe for success if you're A&M, because this is an offense sometimes, too, that struggles with consistency on offense. But I think it's going to be awfully interesting to see what State does. Ben Rabin and Massimo Biscardi have kind of shown with regularity they can put the ball out of the end zone. So you've got to do the same thing to them that they're trying to do to you, and that's limit Devin Achane's influence in the return game. You got to kick the ball away from him. Just kick it out of the end zone. And I know it's easier said than done, but this could be a situation where the kickers play a big role in this because of the fact that I do think teams are going to struggle to score in the red zone, so you're probably going to have to kick some longer field goals.
Right.
And then when you go out there and have that subsequent kickoff, you can't give them plus territory. You got to go out there and put the ball in the end zone. I think in a game like this, where every play and every possession matters, whoever wins the battle field position ultimately probably wins the football game.
I think what you're describing is when you sign that many 4- and 5-star players like A&M, even though Jimbo Fisher's not a good offensive coordinator, it's almost like those elite teams are automatically, most of the time, good on special teams because they just put so many fast, athletic players out there on those units too, right? Where you see some bleed over from MSU, Ole Miss, and Arkansas as far as playing a ton of starters on special teams and so on. Do you see where I'm going there, Steve?
Yeah, I do. And I think this is the importance, too, of recruiting solid kickers. And that's been one of the things that's been elusive at times from Mississippi State. When you know that you're not going to get scored upon on a kickoff, I mean, there's a lot of confidence, not just in your team, but your fan base and the atmosphere of the game. I mean, how many times have we seen it where even with Tulu Griffin, who is one of the elite return guys in the country, when that ball settles down short of the goal line, you kind of hold your breath a little bit because you think something big's fixing to happen, and sometimes it does. But when you can neutralize that threat, you give your team a chance to win exponentially here in an incredible way. And so I think that's something, too, to really watch the game within the game is who wins on special teams between Texas A&M and Mississippi State. Because I think you and I probably would agree this game's probably going to go down to one score.
All right. Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show. How do you think the offensive line will hold up against what A&M brings to the table as far as their defensive line? They don't have a super stud edge rusher, but they've got good players. And what do you think Durkin will try to dial up? He had Sam Williams playing at the top of his game last year. Different deal this year. What do you expect to see Durkin try to do to make Rodgers uncomfortable?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing, and I think you're right about too. I mean, they don't have a Sam Williams, and I thought Ole Miss really utilized him well last year. Moved him around, put him on that right tackle spot. Had him when the game was still in doubt on that drive that basically the Ole Miss defense shut State's hopes out. It was because of Sam Williams. I mean, the way they utilized him was huge. Now, this A&M team has not done a good job rushing the passer. And that's the thing. You go look at those numbers. It's like the perception is, well, these guys have recruited all these 4- and 5-star guys. The pass rush has got to be great. It hadn't been. If memory serves me correct, they've only got, I think, 5 sacks on the year. I think that's right. But they have not done a great job getting a quarterback on the ground. And so if you're Will Rogers, you got to know that. But, I think where State has probably the ability to make some plays here is the fact that there's some interior defensive linemen on that Aggie defense that have been banged up, and some guys haven't been playing. And so you got to keep Will Rogers upright. But I do think that we'll see some sneaky stuff. They have played a lot of 3-man fronts and mix it up with their coverages and play some nickel and some dime stuff. But I expect to see some guys come off that edge. Maybe you walk a safety up. Maybe you bring a middle blitz to make Will uncomfortable. But I don't think they're going to sit back like they did last year and just let Will carve them up.
Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Boy, this it's beyond big because you pulled a super crappy schedule if you're MSU, one, all in all. And then your 2 East teams are at Kentucky, where Kentucky's not what they were, in 1988. And you play Georgia at home. So unlike, you got some other teams who have some wiggle room with their draws. Kind of frame up, if you don't get this one, Steve, it's tough sledding.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when you look at the stretch that's coming up, this is the defining stretch in the schedule. I don't think anybody could argue against it. A&M at home, Arkansas at home, and you go to Kentucky, and Kentucky has been good at home. State's lost there the last 3 trips up there. I think this Kentucky team is a little bit overvalued, to be quite honest with you. And it's like, how good are they? Because when they beat Florida, we're like, that's a loud win. And then you look at Florida since then, that has lost a little bit of its luster. But you got to go take care of business this weekend against A&M. This is an A&M team that's not great. It's a team that's not going to score a lot of points. You get them at home. You've won 5 of 8 in the series. And I think there's probably a lot of people in the SEC media that don't know that, which is amazing to me. It's like they always talk about, it's just Mississippi State. And you look at the record against Arkansas, you look at the record against A&M, and so these are games that are basically your contemporaries. Forget the budget at A&M. When you look at what they have done since they've joined the league, they're very comparable to Mississippi State. So you got to go out there. You get a team that is basically a toss-up game in your own venue. You've got to go win that game. And so I don't think there's a lot of pressure on Mississippi State, but I think there is a level of urgency. They get these next 2 games, especially the ones at home, are going to determine if this is just an average season or a good season. If you get all 3 of these games, it could be a great season. But the reality of it is these next 3 weeks will define the season for Mississippi State. And you're in year 3 with Mike Leach. And so, you go out there and you post a 6-6 and a 7-5 record. I mean, it's not a great thing when you consider maybe a confidence level from the fan base. You go out here and you win these next 3 ball games, and all of a sudden you look up and you're 6-1, heading down the stretch. There's going to be a lot of confidence down the stretch, but it all starts this weekend with A&M. You got to go win this game.
How concerned are you that the game could be too big? The last 2 big games that they've played, you felt like the moment got a little too big for them. And that was the Golden Egg game last year, the LSU game in Baton Rouge. How concerned are you with that? It may not be a pattern yet, but, going into the weekend against A&M.
I'm really not this week because of the fact that I think State's had some success against Texas A&M since Mike Leach has been in the league.
That's true.
I think these guys feel like we can play with these guys. I think you lost a couple of egg balls. Well, then, you feel like, hey, we're having trouble beating these guys. You got to turn it around. So a lot of that pressure is self-imposed. And I think, that trip to Kentucky could be one where the moment proves to be big if you're not careful because of the fact that you haven't had success on the road in Lexington. But I think because of the familiarity with the team and the fact that, let's be honest, State probably should have won that game at College Station last year with a little more margin to work with. And so I think they feel confident about that. Arkansas, that's again, they've lost the last two, but I think everybody probably realizes that State gave both of those games away. And so I think there's a confidence level for these next two games, knowing that they can play with these guys. I think the question, like when you played LSU, is you go on the road and we haven't had a lot of success there, and people can say what they want to, but that pressure's in the room. I don't care what anybody says or does. Kids are not oblivious to the fact they hadn't had a lot of success down there. And so I think that proved to be a little bit big late. I think it's one of those things too. It's like the guy that's running the half marathon. It's like you get a mile over your PR. As it comes to distance, you think, man, I'm really doing it. And all of a sudden the anxiety takes over. It's, oh my gosh, I've never run this far before. And I think that's kind of what happens in games like that. That's where your leadership's got to step up. Your seniors, and this is a veteran team. I mean, I know that a lot of these guys don't have maybe the snaps that maybe you'd like to have because they're just kind of waited their turn. But if you're Mississippi State and you look at the fact that you're one of the most experienced and older teams in this league, and Jimbo pointed that out, that 20 of State's 22 on defense are juniors or seniors. So it's time for those older guys, those experienced guys, to lead this team and take a step forward as a program this year.
All right, we'll leave it. You want to give us I know where you're going, but I know you're picking Mississippi State. You want to give us a prediction?
Well, I would love to go stay at the Golden Moon. I hadn't played golf in forever, but I know I'm eligible for this. But I would, I think State wins it maybe 24-20. And that might be on the high side a little bit. I think if State can come out hot like they have the previous few ball games offensively, they come out hot, and all of a sudden the pressure shifts to Ole Miss and shifts to A&M and shifts to Max Johnson. I think you might see a little more margin, but I do think it's going to be similar to last year's game, but probably goes down to the final possession.
I agree. I do think it is going to be super tight and pretty much low scoring. All right. Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show, genespage.com, 247 Sports, the Boneyard Podcast. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Steve's in line with where I was. I was talking earlier in the show. I expect both games to be low scoring for this day and age in the 24-21 range. And here's the deal. Can Mississippi State score throwing the ball in the red zone? Especially inside the 10 or the 5. I don't know if you can get Marks or Dylan Johnson in the end zone against a stingy, good red zone scoring efficiency, defensive scoring efficiency defense like A&M. That will be interesting to see. And then, of course, A&M can't score. Well, I guess you're hoping they don't even get in the red zone, right? Could it be a field goal kicking day? It's supposed to be a beautiful day. I haven't checked any, kind of like the wind. Now, you've got that storm that can, affect 900 miles away as far as wind and the breeze and so on. You've got the hurricane in the Gulf. But when you're talking about lining up on the left or right hash mark, in a close game, whether it's in Oxford or Starkville, 35, 40, 45-yard field goals, I think that's something to look at too. Now, the weather should be perfect, but I haven't checked as far as whether we'll have some wind gusts and so on. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. Hour number 3 of the Out of Bounds Show. Next.